And we are back. That was the play team, captain and crewing the good ship, the Unsinkable 2, from in the excellent Sea of Thieves. Um, and yeah, just before we cut to that, we were discussing some issues highlighted in productivity from Frontier, and that's what we thought we would have a bit of a discussion about. Um, the world of remote work in the world of video games is something we've touched on in the past, and there's obviously a lot to dig into, but we've been giving it some thought and we've got some experiences. Yeah, Ben, any opening thoughts?
Yeah, it's interesting coming back to it. You say we've talked about this before, touched on it before, but we're now getting into nearly, we're not far off a year of this being the norm, so to speak. And as we said before, we went into the checks out video. Kind of, it feels like gaming is kind of hitting feeling the tail end, like the slow burn of some of the issues around remote working, with other industries, some not even able to do remote working. So, fortunate for anyone who can work remote has been able to keep doing that. There's a lot of people who haven't. But that was felt very immediate, whereas gaming obviously had a bit of a bumpy start and then kind of settled into it. But now we're seeing, every week we talk about game delays, and as Frontier have now confirmed, remote working is playing a part on that. I found interesting, and maybe not that surprising. What they said was any kind of individual based tasks haven't been too bad. They haven't seen many efficiency discrepancies between what would happen in a studio and what's happening remotely. But where they're feeling the pinch is the larger projects, the collaborative tasks, maybe leaning towards a creative output task where typically there would be multiple people working on it at the same time in the same place, and that's what's slowing down as a result of remote working.
Yeah, it's really interesting. We've talked before some of the sort of success stories in it when we early on were all sort of packed up and went home. We kind of paid uh, tribute to the Moon Studios of the Ori games, who have always been remote. And at that point, I think that was probably I think they've reached around 50 or so people for the last news that I saw, and that was a sizable team, and a testament to what you can achieve in with a reasonably large remote team. But now everybody has been effectively gone remote, and we've got the 2, 3, 4, 500 person studios trying to figure it out, and I think Frontier are one of the larger ones in the UK for sure. Yeah, it's definitely interesting to see those who are managing, those who are obviously set up for it, and then is there a point, is there a scale that which remote can't work for game development? It'll be interesting to see how that unfolds over the coming months and whether any stick with it permanently, whether everybody rushes back to the studios. Yeah, very very interesting times.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about the setup, because I think that when I said about the initial bumpy start for games, I think that was the initial problem, is getting everyone set up and geared to work, getting all the high powered equipment home and into their remote environment. And then it's kind of everyone is then beholden to their own setup. When you're in a studio, kind of you're all in one ecosystem, you're all working on off the same infrastructure, and everyone is working on kind of a level playing field. Whereas, as we've seen, obviously we don't necessarily do as much high power stuff as some of the gaming development tasks, but we've seen it before. If someone's internet is struggling, that can take them essentially out of a meeting which that they need to be in, or it can make things harder. So when everyone else is looking after their own infrastructure and reliant on factors that they're not used to controlling in an environment where it needs to work at the time it needs to work, that can make things difficult. And I think that's maybe what Frontier are getting at when they're saying these larger collaborative tasks are where things are slowing down, and that's a knock-on effect of these things happening. And also maybe just being in person. We know that you throwing ideas around helps, and you can do that remotely, and maybe some people prefer to do that in person, and don't feel maybe quite as creative behind a screen as sitting next to someone and scribbling things down and watching people doing it. So that, I think that might be also having an effect.
I think as well, especially with these larger teams, but any team really, when you're used to working a certain way. We talk about the success stories of remote, but they've started from nothing remote and added, start off with a team of five and grown and grown and grown, and your conditioned behaviors and the way you work are kind of remote by default. When you are team office location based by default, and then we have this sudden switch, there's going to be a lot of friction in embracing and figuring out what works right for you and your organization. And yeah, that transition, it was probably very, very difficult on a lot of production lines.
Mm. And I think as well, going back to the setup, like I think everyone's done a great job of getting themselves set up at home and able to work at home. But something that, not to be forgotten about is studios have incredibly expensive equipment and incredibly expensive setups that cannot be moved. Like it's very difficult to pick up an audio recording studio and move it to someone's house. Like we've been in studios and we've seen setups, and it's the effort that's gone to create the perfect optimal setting to get exactly what you need out of it, to then not be able to go there and use it, is definitely going to have an impact. Like I say, you can't pick that up and move it to somebody's house. That's just not feasible to do. So that can make life really, really difficult. And I think something we were talking about before we came on the stream is that different jobs are probably better suited to remote. Like I feel like in the job that I do, doing like account management and strategy, that kind of thing, like being at home isn't really a blocker for me. I can do that anywhere. And in fact, being at home sometimes is better because I can get some headspace and some quiet. Not that often with everything going on, but like that, it doesn't really affect my job too much. But other people who work closely together and maybe have jobs, as we've said, working with high power equipment like that, it's going to be much harder for them to transition their job to a remote environment.
I think there's a potentially really interesting future based on that focusing on the specialist equipment, like you say, which you can't take a multi-person recording studio and put it into somebody's back bedroom. You can't say you can't. People are achieving incredible things with their home setups, but
Mm.
like motion capture, multi-person interactive scene motion capture, that's just not something you can do in your garden. There's all those sorts of jobs, but at the same time, like you said, there are certain jobs that are fine to do remotely, and maybe some of the studios are seeing the benefits to the remote culture. Maybe they're seeing opportunities to perhaps downsize their office space, and you could see one version of the future where perhaps these specialist equipments become dotted around areas and maybe even shared, kind of like an Airbnb for recording studios and motion capture and things like that. Maybe there's an evolution of the way studios operate, because yes, you can get to a point where your actors or your voice artists or your audio people can go and use the equipment, but is it worth having a 700 person studio with a 10 person, just 10 people in the audio suite? Maybe that's a bit wasteful.
Yeah, and I think another positive of the remote working setup is that we know from working with multiple game studios and being in around in the industry, like recruitment is always really high on a priority list for pretty much every studio out there. Everyone is hiring and everybody is trying to get the best talent. And going remote all of a sudden opens you up to hiring from anywhere. All of a sudden, the recruitment pool becomes a lot larger, which when everyone's recruiting is great because there's only so many people going around. It just makes life a little bit easier there in that you can find the best person to do the job
Yeah,
anywhere. You're not restricted by your location or having to deal necessarily with relocation costs, making someone make a difficult decision of maybe uprooting their family and taking them for their job. If they can get a great job and not have to move, then that's win-win for everybody.
yeah, and it's also interesting seeing which certain studios are leaning into that and saying, well, actually, yeah, as long as we've got the best person for the job, they can be anywhere around the world. And at the and the I guess the counter to that, people are, like we've been discussing, struggling with the access to equipment, the collaboration, and a big factor that we've been doing a lot of thinking about recently is the impact on culture, and having everybody together in a game studio. That is like when you're picturing your ideal career and you want to work in games, you don't picture yourself in your bedroom sat at your computer chatting to people on video feeds. You picture a really funky environment and games and collaboration sessions, whiteboard sessions, all these kind of real fun environments, and that's how game studios sell themselves. They showcase this through their websites, through recruitment videos. It's like, look at this environment, look at this dynamic, isn't it great? And now, even with these huge recruitment needs that the studios have, you can't really showcase that. You can't show an empty office. Yeah, we're having some really interesting conversations around, well, how do we showcase our culture and our dynamism and the great talent that we've got via these little boxes and Zoom calls.
Yeah, a screenshot of a Zoom call doesn't quite have the same effect as a video going through these amazingly kitted out studios with a buzzing environment. So yeah, it's as you say, we've been having some really interesting conversations about how you can forefront that culture, and I think it's almost starting to think of your culture in a different way. Obviously, that is, as you said, that's a huge pull for people, the environment, and the things that are in studios. But that's not necessarily the culture. The culture is about how you feel when you're working and the people that you're working with. So it's kind of bringing that more to the forefront and being like, right, how do we communicate that out rather than all the gadgets and toys that we've got? It's why is it great to work here and be an employee of this company? So, and that's a great discussion to have, and it's that information is there and people know what it is, and it's great to actually see that start being brought forwards, and bringing that into the conversation as opposed to just maybe necessarily just perks of an office. So that's really interesting to have those conversations that, as you say, we've been having a lot with various different studios. So
Yeah, I think as well it's worth highlighting that what we're looking at is the transition. We aren't all working remotely. We are all currently working at home during a pandemic, and there's
yeah,
a different thing. And now I guess what we're talking about is switching to, okay, what is the difference? What is the optimal setup for remote working, and how do we want to reintroduce some of these challenges that we can't solve in the current conditions, but have we learned something from this experience that actually we can take forward and we can evolve our mindsets and our default modes of operating, and yeah, it's an interesting forced evolution of how we work and how we operate, and certainly in the game space, the impact it's had there is, as you said, we're seeing delays every week of something or another, and conversely, we've talked about the benefits of the global situation as well. The games that are already released, especially the games as a service, the long life games, they've seen huge benefits to the fact that the rest of the world are sat at home looking for things to do. So yeah, I guess commercially, games studios, publishers, the games industry has fared comparatively excellently to many other harder hit sectors. But this next wave. I mean, we've launched a generation of consoles under these conditions, and when was somewhat starved of next generation content because of the impact on game production. So yeah, we're certainly not at the end of these lessons that we're learning, I think.
no, I think you're absolutely right in that it's not everyone's all of a sudden gone remote. We're making do, but I think what this is going to help us over the past 12 months, a lot of great feedback is going to come out for companies, which I'm sure will find its way out into the wider market as well, so everyone can benefit from is how people like to work and want to work and how they need to be set up. Because I think we're not going to see everyone all of a sudden just right, we're 100% remote now, because not all people want to do that. It doesn't benefit everyone, and not all employees want to do that. I mean, we know from even in our own teams, there are people who really love working from home and other people who want to get back in an office as soon as they can. So getting all that feedback back is going to make life easier for making those decisions. Right, how do we make working great for everyone? Be that a split remote office, how do we make an office better if we're going full time in the office? How do we make it work if everyone's remote? So as you say, it's obviously a horrible situation we're in, but there's a lot of great information that's going to come out of it for how we can improve and make working life a lot better going forwards. and a lot of people who are going to be taking the brunt of that, as we know from our own company as well, is the IT departments in all these companies who are kind of lurking in the background as the unsung heroes who are having to deal with getting everyone at home, getting everyone set up, dealing with everyone's inevitable problems remotely. I'm glad I don't work in the IT department because it's probably, it's not been easy for anyone over the last 12 months, but I feel like they've probably had a bit of a rough time.
I
So give
think
some love to your IT guys.
Yeah, I mean, I think in any company that's had to go remote as a result, the IT and the infrastructure side of things has been a challenge. But I think I can't picture much more of a more challenging environment than a game studio to have to go and yeah, like you mentioned before, the high powered equipment that you need or the specialist equipment that you need, the connectivity. A lot of the specialist tools rely on things known as license servers. So your I don't know, your 3D package. It's enabled by the fact that it's on a network and it can see the license server saying yes, this is a valid machine, and all of a sudden that's got to be distributed, working with home connections, dealing with consumer grade routers, and yeah, that is a monumental task, and I can't begin to imagine how a several hundred person studio, how those IT folks manage that. So, like you said, unsung, like we mentioned in the first half, community management, unsung heroes, definitely IT departments in games. Uh, Massive credit to them.
Yeah. Now we could talk about remote and the effect it had for hours and hours and hours, but we won't keep them for hours and hours and hours. So just the final thing I want us to, because I'm sure we'll come back to this at some point, that I want us to close off on is kind of, it's not necessarily just for games companies. This is for people who have gone remote and working from home as a whole. Um, is how you can keep up. We've touched on the culture, how you can keep up that culture. Because when we all first went into home working, everyone was, for, getting on the Zoom call, doing the quizzes. And, as I'm sure everyone has seen organically over the 12 months, that kind of, it peters out and it's easy for that to just disappear. And all of a sudden you're by yourself, and the people who don't want to be at home working by themselves, that becomes even more of a struggle. So it's interesting. I know you said you were having a conversation the other night about how to combat that. So how do you think you can do that? How do you think
Yeah,
you can?
so yeah, it is definitely a phenomenon that I think people are kind of realizing is there was almost a sense of excitement, if you like, in the new way of working at first, and we were all jumping on. Yeah, we would have the weekly quizzes and the kind of that we were really putting in a lot of effort to try and generate the fun and the feel of that we're losing from being a together team in an office, and now we are a year down the line, and some of those behaviours have petered off. Some of the novelty has worn off, and certainly, and we've found this ourselves. You can end up going weeks at a time, and the only communication you have with your colleagues are very purposeful. We've got to have a meeting. We'll jump on a video call, but it's for a reason. It's for a purpose, and it's very action orientated, and it's very productivity focused, and it's exhausting and it's tiring. It's definitely taken its toll on everybody's kind of mental health. And I was in a roundtable discussion around HR and ops with some other games companies, and it was really interesting to see everybody sharing these kind of same recognition, and kind of learning or realizing that it's not an individual company problem to fix. It's actually, again, it's the state of working at home in a pandemic. And we know from some of the tools that we use, the kind of the happiness indexes and things like that are trending down across the board, across industries, across role types, and it's hard at the moment. And In terms of battling it, I think what's important and what we've recently realized and was certainly highlighted in this discussion is we need to revisit that we put in place all these great things to begin with, but we've kind of let them stagnate, and actually maybe it's time to keep injecting something new, something fun. As we got our normal host Adam did a great sort of scavenger hunt exercise for us the other week, and that was really good fun, and that was very much the first time in a while we'd all just come together to actually have some fun rather than just get the job done. So I think revisiting, revisiting the things that maybe have got a bit stale, maybe bringing back some of the things that we've stopped doing, and yeah, just thinking about how can we, what else can we do, what can we do that's different, and obviously operating within the restrictions that people around the world are having to deal with. It's definitely something to reassert ourselves on, that this isn't a normal situation and we do need to keep trying, but equally perhaps give ourselves a break, that this isn't necessarily a problem any one person or team or company can just fix.
Yeah, that's a very good point from Steve in the chat, who's saying, obviously, yeah, the tech aspects, you can sort that out, but it's the people on the health side is a different beast and difficult to maintain. As you were just saying, yeah, it's important that we don't forget that, and we don't just focus on getting the tech stuff sorted, because we can sort that, but it's difficult with people, as Steve says. So, yeah.